Hi and welcome to this review slash overview of the Feiyutech Scorp C 3-axis motorised gimbal. Now it does come in a box. The box is a cardboard box with a foam moulded or cut out insert. It's very boring, it's just a box. I will show a picture of that later, however, if you're into that kind of thing. But I want to dive straight into the gimbal itself. Here we see it in its folded position and with the tripod leg on. So with this bit here removed, that is the gimbal in its entirety. And you have a handle here, you have a handle here for different functions. So what I'm going to do is go through the whole setup of fitting a camera. So each of these axes are independently lockable, and in this position they are all locked in place. And this carriage, which your Arca Swiss style plate sits on, is also independently lockable. So the first thing we do with this is pull this out a little to the end and just lock that in place and undo this knurled locking nut for the camera to mount onto. Here are a couple of cameras that I would typically be using on this gimbal. This is my Canon EOS 650D, currently with a TSE 24mm lens on, which is not something I would ordinarily use on the gimbal, but being a hefty lens, I just want to kind of demonstrate the usability on this. This weighs in at about 1.2 kilos with the battery and with all of the filters and everything attached. And this is my EOS M with its EFM 22mm lens, considerably lighter, as you can imagine. And this tripod, I believe, is said to hold up to 2.5 kilo, I think it is. You could probably fit a Canon EOS 5D Mark II, 3 with a decent lens on that. So I'm going to take the tripod mounting plate just for the moment off of the M, and we're going to fit the 650D onto the gimbal. Included with the gimbal are two Arca Swiss style mounting plates. These would either be used with just the larger one on its own, or with the larger and smaller ones together. There are 3 mounting screws, so if you use both together, 2 mounting screws hold the smaller plate firmly on top of the larger plate. The larger plate has graduations, so you can see where that's fitted in the mount. And there is a little pointer on the mount to point out whether that's in the correct place or not. Additional is this Y-shaped piece here, which is a lens barrel support, and is something that should be used on slightly larger lenses, and this one is a prime example of that because it's a very hefty lens. Before we mount the camera, what we have to do is we unlock this axis and we lock this in its mounting position, which is slightly turned, and then we unlock this axis and we lock this in its mounting position, which is at 90 degrees to its locked position. So you can see that's what we're looking at there. At this point we need to fit the Arca Swiss plate into the mount, and just here we're looking to get it sort of roughly something like right. First thing I'm going to do is unlock this, and you'll see that that's not balanced at the moment. That's swinging quite badly. First thing we need to do is adjust the axis, this axis here, so that this balances in a lens facing upright position. So with everything secure, we need to unscrew this screw and move this arm out here until we reach balance. Anyone who's ever built radio controlled aircraft will know about centre of gravity and balance points, and it's the same kind of thing with a camera. There will be a central point on this camera where it's perfectly balanced, so you know that that's going to be roughly in the middle of the lens in that aspect. So what you need to do is very slightly move this up and down until we have got this balancing very, very nicely with the lens pointing straight up, and we're very close there. I'm going to tighten that at that. So there we go, that's quite nice. The next thing we need to do is put this in the forward position and see which way the camera tilts. Now it will either tilt forward or back. In this case it's tilting back. That means it's back heavy, so we need to slide the entire tray forward. Before we do that, however, you want to unlock the carriage and move this over as far as possible to the right while still allowing fore and aft movement to balance the camera. So we can see it's still balanced like so, and it tilts backwards there, so we need to slacken this off, slide this forward until we reach balance, and that looks pretty good. And you know that you're right and you're in a good sort of balancing point when the camera will stop pretty much wherever you set it. With that done, we can move on to the next arm to balance, and that is this arm right here. So we unlock this with the latch down here, and you can see that that's immediately falling down to the left. So we need to slacken off this arm, and we need to move this over to the right. Essentially, whichever way it falls, you're moving the arm in the opposite direction. And again, we're looking for a roughly kind of central balancing point. So you'll be able to eyeball and get the things in roughly the right place, no matter what camera you mount to it, once you've kind of got the idea of where your balancing point for the camera that you're mounting will be. And as we can see, again, relatively quickly there, we've got this one balanced quite nicely, returns to center, and that's pretty good. I'm happy with that one. The final one to do, and this one is a slightly trickier one, but again, we need to reference the rule previously mentioned about trying to physically eyeball the center of gravity on here. So the final one we need to do is unlock this arm, which allows it to swing 360 degrees, as you can see. And the balance of this one should be such that when the camera is tilted with the lens facing up, the center of gravity needs to be directly above the rotating part of the base. And the description in the book is a little bit vague and a little bit hard to follow. So my first attempt had this arm too far forward, and it wouldn't actually do the rotating effect that I will demonstrate shortly. So we need to set this up in such a way that when you start to tilt it forward slightly, it doesn't noticeably swing violently to one side or the other. So if it needs to be relatively steady, and that's actually not bad where it is. I think it needs to go forward very slightly. This had previously been set up for the M, so yeah, so we tilt it forward, and I think we still need to go forward a little more, but remembering all the time that we're looking for the center of gravity to be directly above this plate where it rotates here. So we know that we're not far off there. That's pretty good, and then if it's in that orientation it should stay put. So I'm quite happy with that. So at that point we've got everything balanced, we're all ready to go. So at this point right here we can switch on the gimbal. Make sure that all three axes are locked, make sure all of the knurled adjusting nuts are tight, including the locking lever for the Arca Swiss plate. Make sure they're all snugged up, and then we switch the gimbal on with a long press on the power button here. As you can see, that will center everything and balance everything out nicely. Now, the recommended thing to do is calibrate the motors. In the manual that's supplied, it doesn't mention doing this until you have changed or replaced a camera or lens or combination thereof on the gimbal. And I suppose that's because the first time you mount something to the gimbal, it will automatically calibrate to whatever you put on it. So I would say it's probably good practice to calibrate it. And to calibrate it, you've got a little switch at the side of this handle here. Long press. And it will vibrate and it will run through a motor calibration process. And what that will do, after that final beep, that's calibrated, what that's doing is it's looking at the weight and strength needed to move the camera and to maintain its position, and it's auto-calibrating the motors. Now we'll look at that a little bit later as well, because there's further things we can do with that using the app. This is everything set and ready to go. So as you can see, if I turn this, this is currently in pan lock mode. So if I turn it like so, it will pan slowly, but if I dip forward and back and I roll left and right, you can see that the camera remains stationary. Now, there is a little bit of vibration when I tip it forward there, although it's stopped doing it now. So maybe it was just after that initial calibration. And this is where the further adjustments in the app come in. So we will cover that later. So in this position, you can get some really nice low down shots, like so. In this position, you've got your typical upright gimbal. And one of the things I liked about this one, and the reason I wanted one of these, was because of this built-in handle, because it not only gives you an additional handle to allow you to get the low down shots, because these are optional handles on most of the gimbals, but it gives you a second handle for better grip. So if you're holding with one hand, you can support it with the other, for especially if you're doing a movement like so. It's important to note at this point, whatever camera you're mounting and setting up on this gimbal, you need to have the battery installed, all of the correct lens installed that you're using, the variable ND filters or whatever filter setup you're using, and if necessary, the screen flipped out if that's how you're intending to use the gimbal. And because that will all affect and upset the balance. You cannot just put an empty camera on and then add the battery and everything afterwards and expect it to work. So at the front of the grip, we have got a trigger button. So what I'm going to do is, using this little joystick, is deliberately knock this out of alignment. So you can see we've got the camera pointing up and turned to the right. Double tap on the trigger button will recenter that and put it back to where it is. If you were filming a vlog and you're walking along, looking at the scenery, chat, triple tap, and this will swing the camera right the way around 180 degrees to face you, so that then you can talk into the camera and do your talky bit. Another triple tap, and it will spin right the way back round to face forward and continue, which is a nice little feature. You have a wheel on this side here, and this will perform several functions. By default, it will pan. If you press this button here, it beeps, and then it will roll like so. Press it again, it will beep, and the camera will now tilt up and down. Press it again, it will beep, and we're back to a pan. Double tap on the trigger and we will recenter. The FPV button will lock all three axes. So as you tilt, it will tilt with you. As you roll, it will roll with you. And as you pan, it will pan with you, but albeit damped. Press it again, it will go back to whatever was default. You have on the other side the power button here, and you have an A and a B button. I'm not sure what the A and B buttons actually do as yet. I haven't quite figured that bit out. But just going from what I've played with already, I can explain the rest of them to you. So on this handle here, as you tip this forward, let's just close those tripod legs a moment. So as you tip this forward, obviously it will maintain a forward position. On this, the back of this handle, you have an anodized aluminium little thumb joystick, which is very, very nicely made and very tactile and very responsive. You can pan left and right, up and down, and do all manner of things with that. You have a record button, which you can use to allow your camera to record if you have a compatible camera, and you have the cable connected to the gimbal from the camera. You have an M button which cycles through the tilt, roll and pan lock modes, so you can either have pan locked, pan and tilt locked, pan, tilt and roll locked, or none of the above. So you can have all of it free flowing. By default, pan will be locked. And then underneath here you have three buttons, L, an A and an R. And this is what everyone is calling inception mode. I don't know if that's an official name for it, but everyone is calling this inception mode. And this is quite a cool little feature. Probably not one I'm going to use much, I'll be honest on that, but it's nifty. So you press the A button and it will lock all of your axes and point straight ahead, like so. and then you press one of your buttons, left or right, it doesn't matter which, and your whole assembly will rotate like so. So you can either pull in or pull back from something with a rolling effect, which is kind of cool. Press it again and it will alter the speed. So we've gone from fairly fast to really slow, and then you've got a kind of mid in between. So, and then if you press the A button, it will actually stop, but once it's back in the central position. Press the A button again, and then the gimbal will return to this position. While we're talking about being in this position here, you have a button on the left-hand side of this handle. Give that a double tap, and you've got TikTok mode, or Insta, or whatever, but basically portrait mode, if you are so inclined as to film in that mode. Again, something I'm not really going to use. Double tap again, and it will return back to its normal mode. That pretty much covers all of the buttons on the gimbal. So let's just set that down there. It's very versatile, it's very nifty, it's very well built. I'm really impressed with the build quality. Nice rubberized grips on the handles though, on both of them. But I do personally think it's really nicely built. I think it's very well put together, very solid, nice solid sturdy arms and what have you. We are going to take a look at the app and all the extra little bits and pieces that we can do with this. But what I'm going to do before we do that is I'm going to swap all this out for the Canon EOS M, because it's a considerably lighter camera and it's just easier to, to manhandle for demonstration purposes. This, for filming purposes, would be absolutely fine, of course. One last thing I will show just before I swap that around and we look at the app. The tripod is a mini tripod that can be unscrewed. You could actually use that for many other things. And then you can screw something like a monopod leg into there to give you a much longer pull for different effects. Just as a for example, but this of course would be its default operating mode without the without this little tripod, if you so desired. And that just simply, as said, screws into the base like so. And if for some reason you didn't want to use this tripod and you were out and about using the gimbal, so we've got this removed. Another nifty feature is this also has built-in bipod legs. So you've got two little legs there that fold out, which allow you to sit this fella down like so. And you've got a nice stable base. So if you're out and about and you want to sit this on a table and then, say for example, do a talking to camera piece, and you could do that, and in conjunction with the app, which again I will show you shortly, you can actually move things around to suit, which is really clever. Lock these off, dismount the camera, and then I can swap these over. The fitting and balancing of this took approximately 6 minutes, and as I say, this would be now the 4th or 5th time that I've mounted a camera onto this. So with practice it gets quicker and easier. There are, when you look up close, there are little markers with a red dot which can be moved into position once you've got your gimbal set up, and they can be left in that position so that it's quicker and easier to place your camera the next time you mount it. However, if you're going to use multiple cameras, then it might not be that useful. If you're perhaps going to use one camera and 2 lenses, it could be very useful in the respect that you can mark them for one lens that you use all the time, and then just make adjustments for the other for the odd occasion, and then quickly put it back when you need to. Or if you're going to use, you know, one camera mainly, and keep the settings for that. But it would have been nice if there had been some way to mark multiple ones. And I would personally think the easiest way would just be to carry a little notepad or make a note on your cell phone with the numbers that correspond on the scales, because all of these arms have scales on them. So as before, long press on the power button and this will switch on and line itself up. As before, long press on the calibration button, because we're going from a very heavy camera to an incredibly light camera in comparison. So when you change your lens, change your camera, you run a calibration. It's very quick, very easy. And there we are, ready to go again. What I'm going to do at this point is come in closer and bring the gimbal into full frame so that we can look at the app screen as well as the gimbal and see what happens. You can get the app from the user guide, which comes in 4 different languages, English, Chinese, German and Spanish, I believe. Very simple, straightforward, but it tells you all you need to know. And it has a QR code for the online version of the user manual and also for the app. So you can click on that and download the app. Open up the app by clicking on the logo. It will come up with a little window telling you with an advert, and then you can skip that after a couple of seconds. And then it will say Feiyutech wants to turn on Bluetooth. So we allow that because it needs the Bluetooth to work to communicate with the gimbal. Searching Bluetooth devices requires location services, so we enable that. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but you know, it's something you have to do, so you have to enable that. We click on the device and it will connect to the device, and the little Bluetooth light on the handle will light up. So let's just twizzle that around so we can actually see. We've got a little Bluetooth light on the handle here. And in here we see the battery level, which is currently at 3 bars out of 4, which reflects likewise on here. And then we have several different panels. Now, I mentioned the vibration with a heavier setup. It seems that the answer for this is to manually adjust the motor power, and you can do that on this screen. So you tap on the motor power and you've got different strengths for the pan axis, the roll axis and the tilt axis. And the tilt axis seems to be the one that gives the vibration related problems, because it's as you're tilting forward, that's when you tend to get the vibration. And you can adjust that. Now you can see in these are actually very low, power 2 and 2 and 9 for the pan axis. When the other camera is mounted, this will be up at 15, this will be up at sort of 12, this will be up at 12 or thereabouts. And I found that actually lowering this to around 7 or 8 gets rid of that vibration completely, and it works smoothly and very, very nice. So that's just so you know that that's there. And you can also press the auto tune button, which will do precisely what this button here does, and it will auto calibrate like so. So clicking on the back arrow, and we can look at scenario, and we have auto rotation. So you can actually tell it to rotate counterclockwise once, clockwise once, or counterclockwise or clockwise in any or a sort of infinite number of times until you tell it to stop, or otherwise, as you can see there. So if this is mounted and you want this to be doing this and you remotely operating it, you can do that, and you can adjust the speed there. So I can take that right down to 1, and as you can see, that moves very, very slowly. Take it right the way up to 10, and the speed picks up. By default, it's at 5, about halfway. So click that off, and then it will stop the next time that this aligns with the handle, like so. And if you press the ones that just do it once, then it will just do it once. The panorama mode allows you to create a 3x3 grid, and let's just select that, for example. Click on start shooting and press the start button, and you'll see it moves up into this position. You can take a photograph. It will then move to this position, take a photograph, then move to the next one, take a photograph, and so on. And you can change these timings and settings in here, and the amount of degrees and everything. And what this is doing is it will take a large panorama stitch so that you can stitch that all together into your software later on. Similarly, you've got the 180 degree one. Start shooting, press the shoot button, and it will start right the way out here, and it will just take a 180 degree sweep with a series of, you can take make it take a series of photographs. Now obviously, if the camera is connected up, I assume you will have the additional feature of allowing the software to do it for you, but you could also use an automatic timer for an older camera such as this or the 650D. So I'm just going to stop that there. We'll recenter the gimbal, we'll go back, and then we've got custom, where you can change the amount of degrees your horizontal vertical focal length, because you can, of course, have this adjust your focal length if you have a compatible camera with an electronically adjustable focal length, such as some of the new Sonys and so on. The amount of overlap, percentage of overlap, and then the interval time, and start shooting. So that's a nice little feature. You can do some fun stuff with that one. We have a time lapse, similar kind of thing, where you've got a hyperlapse, a static time lapse, and a motion lapse, and then you can set the amount of minutes, the frames per second, the interval. I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what to do with that because I don't. And then track video, again, I'm really not 100% sure what this is, but you put tracking points in. So you essentially, you can change the direction and angle of the camera, for example, and then you can add that, and then you can add another tracking point, and then you can add that, and so on. Exactly what it does beyond that, I don't know, but that's the scenario button for you. Button settings, I'm assuming at this moment, allow you to make changes to what the unit will do. So you've got pan follow, for example, FPV mode, and so on. I'm not 100% sure exactly how they work yet because this is all new to me. So I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about it, of course. We're just going to put that back into typical pan follow and recenter it. Motor power we've already looked at. Follow speed, you can adjust slow, medium, fast, or custom, and you can actually set the dead zone and follow speed. Now, follow speed is quite obvious in terms of how quickly the pan will follow. So it's set to medium by default. So when you turn that like so, you can see there's a little bit of a delay before it starts swinging. So let's just turn that to fast, and that should react much faster as it does. So if you're doing sort of whip pans, obviously it's not quite whip pan, but it will give you a faster option. And then you also have a slow option, which gives you a very slow pan left or right. And this, of course, can be applied to roll and tilt as well as you need. And of course, medium is default. And then, of course, your custom one allows you to customize it. So camera settings, it won't do anything because this is not connected, because this is an old camera and it's not connectable. Horizon calibration, we can click on auto calibrate, and it will run through a calibration like so and level everything so that we've got a level horizon, which it seems to think it has just now. You can adjust it manually. But that, again, that's something I've not looked at. So for the moment, I'm just sticking with auto everything. And underneath more, you can do things like make a silent boot so it doesn't make the beep noise, disable selfie mode, which I'm assuming is that one. So let's just try. It is indeed. So that's quite handy. So that means you can disable that, so you cannot accidentally have someone hit the trigger or hit the trigger and have that swing around. So that could be potentially useful. Yeah, I like that. And manual lock, I'm not, or you can manually lock the pan and the tilt, looking at that. And then firmware information, I'm assuming at some point there will be a firmware update. This is all under the device heading. Then you have a skill heading, which is essentially all of the videos that you can find on YouTube on how to set the Scorp up from Feiyutech themselves. And then under the Me tab, you've got various things to do with Feiyutech and advertising and so. The last thing remaining on the menu to show you is the remote operation of the gimbal. And when you look at the top of the screen, it tells you which current device is connected. If you tap on the current device that's connected, you have the controls, which will display on this screen. So on this screen you have the device and the device battery. You have a joystick settings button. If you tap that, this will show you two sliders where you can adjust the tilt and pan speed. They're set to 50 by default, so I'll just put them up to 100 for the moment. And you can also invert the pan and the tilt operations should you wish to do so. Underneath that you have 4 buttons. This one brings the gimbal back to center, equivalent to double tapping on the trigger. This one with a lightning icon, I don't know what that does. It doesn't seem to do anything with this setup, so I suspect that some of these functions, as in some of these down here that I will explain in a moment, I suspect have to do with having a camera wired to the gimbal. And this next feature here is your TikTok or Insta or portrait mode, and then the next one is your selfie mode, like so. Tap on the first one and that will just swing it back round and recenter and rebalance everything. You have a button on the top here, which if you swipe left and you swipe right, that will roll the camera accordingly. And then you have your joystick in the middle. So if you go up, it will tilt up, down, it will tilt down, left, it will tilt left, right, it will tilt right, or a combination of both by moving it to the appropriate quadrant, so it's a press, drag and slide kind of operation. To recenter, again, just press the recenter button. And then down here you have a lock symbol. Pressing this doesn't seem to make any difference. Then you have this sort of 2-axis gimbal symbol and then this 6-axis gimbal symbol. Neither of these seem to do anything different to this one for me, so I'm assuming that must be camera specific related when you have a camera connected up, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. And then down here you have a button which will swap between video and photo mode, so you can press this and take videos or photos accordingly. So this makes an already versatile gimbal into something much more versatile and will allow you, for example, to shoot a documentary style feature with this sitting on a table or on a tripod or something similar, and then and also allow you to pan left, right, tilt up and down remotely without having to have someone else operate the gimbal, which I think is a really nice little feature. And that pretty much wraps up the features of the app, and pretty much wraps up this preview and overview of the gimbal. I hope you found this interesting and useful, and I personally can't wait to get out and actually start using this and see what kind of results I can get from it. There is one very last thing that I would like to show you before we leave this video, and that is my previous gimbal, as it were, which is really just a Steadicam platform. This is my first proper 3-axis motorized gimbal, and prior to that, my only means of stabilization on the move was this, and this little device here is called a Merlin Steadicam. At the time, in its day, it was quite a clever thing, and there have been many sort of cheaper variants that do a similar kind of thing to this. But this one, as you can see, has a handle with a great deal of rotational movement and a platform with knurled adjustable wheels and on the left and on the back to adjust fore and aft and left and right, so you can balance a camera on there perfectly flat. The counterweight here and the counterweights here, and then this arc itself, which is adjustable. You can screw this knob in and out and it will close up or widen the arc. And then for storage, the whole thing will actually fold up like so. So it's really nice and compact, clever thing, and will adapt to a wide range of camcorders and cameras. And camcorders were still in popular use at the time that this was created, and I really thought this was fantastic. Of course, it's not a patch on the modern gimbal, as you can imagine, but it is a beautifully made thing, and I just wanted to show that kind of out of interest. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.